My world tilted, then shattered on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary day you never mark until it marks you. I was giving a guest lecture on 19th century manuscript preservation when a searing pain shot through my head like a rogue firework exploding behind my eyes. Next thing I knew, I was staring up at the harsh fluorescent lights of an ICU, a doctor telling me I'd had a major hemorrhagic stroke. 2 weeks later, drifting in and out of a haze, I fumbled for my phone. Just one message. It was from Lydia, my wife of 25 years. "No, how are you? No, I'm worried." Just a screenshot of our joint savings account door. Beneath it, her words, "This is what I deserve for all those wasted years. Don't try to find me." I think I just blinked. Then, very slowly, I typed back a single thumbs up emoji. The next day, when they discharged me, shaky but alive, I didn't go home. My name is Arthur Bellwether, 52 years old, and for the past 30, I've been the head archivist at Northwood University's library. My life revolved around dusty ledgers, brittle parchments, and the quiet satisfaction of preserving the past. It wasn't exciting, not in the way Lydia craved, but it was stable. It provided. Or so I thought. The stroke had come out of nowhere, or maybe the signs had been there. Subtle tremors I'd dismissed as stress from digitizing the Ainsworth collection. Lydia had been distant. More dinners out with friends I never met. Hushed phone calls she'd end abruptly if I entered the room. I'd chalked it up to a midlife restlessness, something we'd work through. The $187,652.33 in that account wasn't just savings, it was our emergency fund, a down payment for a small cabin we'd talked about, my meticulously managed retirement supplement. Gone. I should have felt fury, a tsunami of rage. Instead, a profound awareness settled over me, a fatigue that had nothing to do with the stroke. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my contacts and called my younger sister, Chloe. She's a school principal, pragmatic, no nonsense. "Need a place to lay low?" I said, my voice raspy. "And I need it to be off the books." There was a short pause. "Lydia," she asked, her tone already understanding more than I'd said. "She knows you're out." "Oh, she knows I'm alive," I managed. "She just doesn't know I'm not playing her game her way." Chloe lived across town, in a modest bungalow filled with the organized chaos of a life dedicated to educating teenagers. She set me up in her guest room, a small, quiet space overlooking her meticulously kept garden. She actually did it. Chloe said, shaking her head after I'd laid out the bare bones. "I never liked her, Arthur, you know that. But this is monstrous." I just nodded, too tired to rehash old arguments. I'd met Lydia at a university fundraising gala. I was there as part of the library's exhibit. She was a junior employee at one of the sponsoring art galleries. She'd seemed captivated by my talk on rare book restoration, her eyes bright with an interest I later realized was more about the perceived prestige of my position than the content. We married a year later. I was 30, she was 28. She loved the idea of being married to an academic, the dinner parties, the intellectual veneer. But the reality of my quiet, focused life, the long hours spent in climate-controlled vaults, bored her. She wanted more. More excitement, more things. The vacations became more extravagant, her wardrobe more expensive. I worked harder, took on extra research projects, always trying to bridge the growing gap between my salary and her desires. Looking back, the warnings were there, like faint marginalia in a damaged manuscript. The new credit card she'd opened. For points. The increasingly vague answers about her. Gallery investments. And then there was Marcus Thorne. He'd appeared about a year ago, a slick wealth manager she'd met at some gallery opening. He was always immaculately dressed. Spoke in soothing, confident tones about maximizing returns, diversifying assets. Lydia was instantly smitten, not romantically, I thought, but by the lifestyle he represented. She started having financial planning, meetings with him. I'd tried to join once, but Thorne had a way of making my careful, conservative approach to finances sound hopelessly outdated. Lydia had sided with him, a subtle but significant shift in our dynamic. There were other things. The way she'd suddenly insisted on passwords for all our online accounts, for security. How she'd sometimes receive official-looking envelopes from unfamiliar financial institutions and quickly tuck them away. I, the archivist, the man whose profession was built on meticulous record-keeping and cross-referencing, had been remarkably unobservant in my own life. But perhaps not entirely. Years ago, after a close colleague had his identity stolen, I'd become almost zealous about digital security and document preservation for our personal affairs. I maintained a separate, encrypted cloud storage for all important documents, mortgage papers, insurance policies, tax returns, even digitized copies of old bank statements. Lydia knew about it in a vague sense, but considered it another of my dusty old man hobbies. And then there was the house. We'd bought it early in our marriage, but when we refinanced 5 years ago to a much better rate, Lydia had been too busy with a gallery show to attend the signing. My credit was stronger, so the mortgage ended up solely in my name. She'd never questioned it, never asked for her name to be added. A small detail, almost forgotten, until now. The medical power of attorney was another thing. My work with fragile historical documents, some containing hazardous materials from centuries past, had made me conscious of contingency planning. Practical Chloe had nagged me about it. I'd set it up years ago, naming Lydia first, but with Chloe as the automatic successor if Lydia was unwilling or unable to act. At the time, it felt like a morbid formality. Now it felt like a lifeline. So, what's the plan? Sherlock, Chloe asked on my third morning, handing me a mug of strong coffee. I hadn't slept much, my mind a whirl of fragmented memories and dawning, sickening realizations. The first rule of archival research, I said more to myself than to her, is to establish provenance. Where did the money go? I started with the most recent joint bank statements I had access to via my personal cloud backup, thankfully. I'd sensed them just before the stroke. The large withdrawal was obvious, a single transaction emptying the account. But there were smaller, regular withdrawals over the past 6 months, always just under $500 to a payment platform I didn't recognize. Payments Inc., I murmured. Chloe peered over my shoulder. Never heard of it. Some kind of online thing? My archivist brain kicked in. I started cross-referencing dates of those withdrawals with Lydia's known activities, her gallery schedule, her social media posts, which she was surprisingly active on. A pattern emerged. The withdrawals often coincided with her girls' spa days or buying trips. My fingers, still a little clumsy post-stroke, flew across the laptop Chloe had lent me. I logged into my own email, the one Lydia rarely used and likely forgot I maintained with fierce security. Sifting through months of promotional clutter, I found it an email confirmation from Payments Inc. Not to me, but clearly misaddressed or part of a bulk list. It was a receipt for a consultation fee paid to Thorn Advisory Group, Marcus Thorn. The blood pounded in my temples. It wasn't just Lydia. It was him. This was coordinated. That afternoon, my old neighbor from across the street, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet elderly woman who always kept an eye on things, sent Chloe a text meant for me, her number for me being outdated. Arthur, dear, hope you're recovering. Just wanted to let you know, Lydia had a gentleman call her a few times while you were away. Drove a rather flashy black BMW, stayed quite late. Thought you should know. A black BMW Thorn's car. The anger finally came, cold and sharp, a shard of ice in my chest. This wasn't just a panicked grab for cash. This was a calculated betrayal, a conspiracy. Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I think I need a lawyer, a very good one, and not just for a divorce. Chloe knew a woman, Eleanor Vance. She's a shark, Chloe had said, but she's our shark. Eleanor's office was minimalist, all glass and steel, a stark contrast to my cluttered academic world. She listened impassively as I laid out the sequence of events, my voice hoarse but steady. I'd brought printouts from my cloud backup, the bank statements, the Payments email, the scanned copy of our original mortgage showing only my name, the medical power of attorney. My archivist's habit of meticulous documentation was finally paying off in my personal life. The joint account funds are problematic, Eleanor said, tapping a pen on the Payments email. She had legal access. However, the timing while you were medically incapacitated, coupled with evidence of this Thorn fellow's involvement, could elevate this. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's a nasty charge, Mr. Bellwether, and if we can prove intent and collusion, it gets nastier. She leaned forward. This Marcus Thorn, you say Lydia was having financial planning meetings with him? Yes, for about a year. She said he was helping her invest a small inheritance from her aunt. An inheritance I now suspected never existed or was long gone. We need to look into Thorn Advisory Group, Eleanor stated. See if it's a legitimate entity or a shell, and we need to trace where that 107,000 went. She then focused on the house. Solely in your name, you say, and you made all the mortgage payments from your salary documented. Yes, Lydia contributed to household expenses from her part-time job, but the mortgage, property taxes, major upkeep, that was all me. I have the records. As an archivist, I instinctively kept meticulous financial records, tracing every significant expenditure. My system of cross-reference spreadsheets and scanned receipts wasn't just a professional quirk, it was second nature. Good, Eleanor said, a hint of a smile. That simplifies one thing. Now about these consultation fees to Thorn. If Lydia was using joint funds to pay him without your knowledge, for services that didn't benefit you, that's another angle. The strategy began to form, file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences, but also initiate discovery related to financial fraud and exploitation. Petition for an emergency order to freeze any accounts Lydia might have moved the money to and to get exclusive interim possession of the house, given my medical condition and her abandonment. One more thing, Mr. Bellwether, Eleanor said as I was leaving. Do not contact Lydia. Not a word, not an emoji. Let her wonder what you're doing. People make mistakes when they're nervous. The next few weeks were a blur of recovery and preparation. Physical therapy to regain full control of my left side, endless discussions with Eleanor, and hours spent digging through my own digital archives. This was where my professional skills truly came into play. I started by examining the metadata of photos Lydia had emailed me from her phone over the years, innocuous snaps from her trips. Hidden within the EXF data were GPS coordinates. Several of these gallery viewings in other cities placed her uncannily close to known offices of Thorne's far-flung house and vaguely defined investment network. Coincidence? Unlikely. Then, I remembered a shared cloud drive we'd once used for vacation planning, long abandoned. Lydia wasn't tech-savvy. She probably forgot it existed. I logged in. Amongst old itinerary drafts, I found a subfolder carelessly named Empty Financials. Inside were PDFs, scans of account statements from an offshore bank in Lydia's name, showing deposits that uncannily mirrored the dates of Thorne's consultation fee. Withdrawals from our joint account, only substantially larger. He wasn't just taking fees, he was helping her siphon money off into an account he likely also had access to or control over. There were also drafts of emails between Lydia and Thorne discussing asset reallocation strategies that sounded suspiciously like liquidating joint property. Thorne's language was coded, full of jargon designed to sound legitimate but clearly pointing towards hiding funds. One email from Thorne to Lydia read, regarding the problematic asset, our house, best to establish alternate revenue streams before any liquidity event is forced upon us. He was coaching her. This was premeditated. The dates on these emails went back almost 18 months. My stroke hadn't been the catalyst for her greed. It had merely been the opportune moment to execute a long simmering plan. The true hint evidence, as Eleanor later called it, came from a seemingly innocuous source. Lydia had a habit of using an old shared tablet for browsing. She thought clearing the browser history was enough. She didn't know about browser cache forensics. With a recovery tool suggested by a tech-savvy nephew of Eleanor's, Sivo, who happened to be a digital forensics student, I was able to pull fragments of deleted communications from a web-based email Lydia used with Thorne. One particularly damning exchange Lydia panicked. What if A finds out about the BVI account before we can move everything? Thorne, soothingly, relax, darling. He's too busy with his dusty old books. By the time he suspects anything, we'll be enjoying the sunshine and he'll be stuck in his mausoleum of paper. Dusty old books. Mausoleum of paper. The clinical detachment I'd maintained until then cracked. The rage was back, sharper this time, honed by the deliberate, contemptuous cruelty of it all. I sent everything to Eleanor. Her reply was swift. They've just handed us the keys to the kingdom, Arthur. Now, we create an opportunity for them to overplay their hand. We deliberately held back on filing the emergency motion to freeze assets. Eleanor advised a different tack. Let them think that they're getting away with it for a little longer. Let them get comfortable. Then, we observe. My part was to remain silent, a ghost in their machine. Weeks passed. No word from me. Eleanor occasionally relayed through back channels that Lydia was getting antsy, calling her old friends, trying to find out where I was. Then, one afternoon, Chloe, who still drove past my old house occasionally, called. Arthur, there's a for sale sign on your lawn. Went up this morning. Lydia was trying to sell the house. The house that was solely in my name. She must have forged my signature or was working with a disreputable realtor Thorne had procured. Perfect, Eleanor said when I called her. She's panicking and overreaching. She's trying to liquidate the primary marital asset. This is exactly what we needed. Eleanor immediately filed for an ex-parte emergency injunction to halt the sale and an order granting me exclusive occupancy, citing my medical recovery needs, Lydia's abandonment, the draining of the joint account, and now, the fraudulent attempt to sell the property. We also included a request for a forensic accounting of all Lydia's known and suspected assets, hinting at the offshore account. The emergency hearing was scheduled 2 days later. Judge Marian Alastair presided, a woman known for her sharp intellect and intolerance for financial shenanigans, especially against vulnerable parties. Lydia was there, looking pale but defiant, with Marcus Thorne hovering protectively beside her. He wasn't her lawyer, but clearly her advisor. Her actual lawyer, a nervous-looking man named Peterson, seemed out of his depth. Eleanor was a vision of calm professionalism. She laid out our case succinctly: my sudden incapacitation, the immediate draining of the joint account, Lydia's disappearance, the evidence of her communication with Thorne about hiding assets, and the audacious attempt to sell my house. Peterson countered weakly, arguing Lydia had felt threatened and insecure due to my increasing emotional distance and was merely secure in her future. He claimed the house was marital property regardless of the name on the deed. Judge Alastair listened, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Lydia. Mrs. Bellwether, your husband suffers a near-fatal stroke, and your immediate action is to empty your joint bank account and attempt to sell the marital home, which isn't even in your name, without his consent. Can you explain that to me? Lydia stammered. I was scared. Arthur was always secretive about our finances. This was rich, coming from the woman with an offshore account. Secretive. Eleanor interjected smoothly. Or was he simply the one managing the finances prudently while your client, Mrs. Bellwether, was, shall we say, relocating joint funds into personal offshore accounts with the assistance of Mr. Thorne? She produced the printouts of the BVI account statements and the damning email exchanges. Thorne, for the first time, looked uncomfortable. Peterson objected, but the judge waved him down. Her eyes fixed on the documents Eleanor handed up. "Mr. Thorne," Judge Alastair said, her voice like chilled steel, "while you are not a party to this divorce, your name appears with alarming frequency in these financial planning documents. Are you a licensed financial advisor in this state?" Thorne puffed up slightly. "I am a wealth management consultant, Your Honor. That wasn't my question. Are you licensed?" He hesitated. "My licensure is pending in this jurisdiction." The judge's eyebrows shot up. Eleanor subtly pushed a printout from the state licensing board towards the clerk. Thorne had no active license, only a long-expired trainee registration. "The court finds sufficient evidence of financial malfeasance, potential fraud, and exploitation of a vulnerable individual," Judge Alastair declared. "Emergency injunction granted. The sale of the property at 12 Elm Street is halted. Mr. Bellwether is granted exclusive temporary occupancy. All known assets of Mrs. Bellwether, including any accounts held with or advised by Mr. Thorne, are hereby frozen pending full forensic accounting. Mr. Peterson, I strongly advise your client to cooperate fully, and Mr. Thorne," she fixed him with a glacial stare, "I'd expect a call from the State Securities Division. You may have also practiced law without a license by advising Mrs. Bellwether on circumventing marital property laws." Lydia looked like she'd been struck. Thorne was ashen. As we left the courtroom, Lydia tried to approach me, tears welling. "Arthur, please, I can explain." I looked right through her and kept walking. The numbness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The next few months were about disentangling the financial web Lydia and Thorne had woven. The forensic accountants, hired by Eleanor and paid from my recovered emergency funds, the judge had ordered a partial immediate return from one of Lydia's more accessible local accounts, unearthed the extent of their scheme. Thorne had been systematically grooming Lydia for years, convincing her I was hiding assets, a classic projection, and encouraging her to set up her own secret financial network. He'd taken a hefty percentage for his services. With the offshore account frozen and Thorne under investigation, Lydia's fight dissolved. She had no resources, no allies. The divorce was finalized relatively quickly, the judge, taking into account Lydia's egregious financial misconduct and attempts to defraud a medically vulnerable spouse, awarded me the house outright. 70% of the remaining marital assets, after much of what Lydia had siphoned was clawed back, minus Thorne's cut, which was harder to retrieve as he declared bankruptcy, and Lydia was ordered to pay a significant portion of my legal fees from her diminished share. I never saw Thorne again. Rumor had it he'd fled the country before the Securities Division could fully bring charges, though there was an outstanding warrant. Lydia, I heard, moved in with her sister in another state, her dreams of a glamorous life in tatters. I sold the house on Elm Street. Too many ghosts. I bought a small, manageable condominium near the university, easy to maintain. I returned to my work at the archive, my sanctuary of paper and ink. The stroke had left me with a slight tremor in my left hand, a permanent reminder. But it also left me with something else, a fierce appreciation for my own resilience. I started a small foundation with some of the settlement money, working with Chloe, to fund financial literacy programs for vulnerable adults. We called it the Bellwether Initiative for Prudent Futures. My work with dusty old books, my mausoleum of paper, had taught me about patterns, about the importance of verifiable facts, and about how easily narratives can be distorted. In the end, my archivist's mind, the very thing Lydia had scorned, had been instrumental in uncovering her deception and reclaiming my life. One evening, sifting through old boxes, I found our wedding album. For a moment, I considered burning it. Instead, I simply placed it back in the box. It was a record of a past, a document like any other. Flawed, certainly, but a part of my history. The betrayal nearly broke me. The illness nearly took me. But I was still here. Changed, yes. Weaker in some ways, but stronger in the ways that truly mattered. Sometimes the most valuable records are not those of grand triumphs, but of quiet survival, of learning to read the faint ink of deception before it fades into the fabric of your life. And sometimes the most profound act of preservation is rebuilding oneself from the ashes.